Are you ready to level up your prepper pantry? Today, I'm sharing something that will change the way you think about survival food. Perfect for prepping, but also so much more. Stick around to learn recipes, tips, and tricks to build your ultimate survival food stash. Hey guys, it's Jera with Wicked Prepared. Welcome back, everyone. I'm here today with another Just Add Water meal in a jar, and today I'm doing classic comfort food. Today's shelf-stable emergency meal is a version of what I've always called shepherd's pie. And I know there's people who are going to get all up in arms because shepherd's pie should be with lamb and it has beef, it's cottage pie, but I grew up calling mine shepherd's pie, even though it's made with beef. So at this point, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? So shepherd's pie it is. I started making meals in a jar as part of my emergency food plan, so my family could have yummy, warm, homemade meals no matter what was going on around us. And it completely changed my prepping game. What we and so many others have found, though, is that they become so much more than just emergency food. Once you try them and see how easy and delicious they can be, you realize they're so much more than just survival food. They're also homemade convenience food, keeping us out of the drive-thru on busy nights, something that kids or grandkids love to help with, whether putting together the jars or preparing the meal or both. They're meals on hand to bring to someone who's sick or just needs a helping hand. They're a fun group activity to bring together like-minded friends or family members. They're perfect for making any camping trip easier, and they can become portable meals to save us time and money when we travel. Come along with me today to see how easy it is to put together these shelf-stable jars of comfort and how simple it is to turn them into a warm home-cooked meal whenever you need one. First, I'm going to do a classic shepherd's pie, but stick around because later I've got a second bonus recipe that I think you're really going to love. Many of the ingredients I'm using in these meals today are on sale right now for Black Friday, so follow my links below or visit tryfreezedried.com to save big right now. Okay, let's get started. The equipment we need for the meals in a jar is very simple. We're going to be using a mason jar. I'm going to be using a wide mouth quart size mason jar, which is what I typically use. Actually, today I'm actually going to be using two for this shepherd's pie because we're going to have the topping and the filling. Now, just a little note about the jars. A lot of people, if they have a smaller family or they're just like a couple of empty nesters or something, they will cut these in half and put them in pint-sized jars to have a smaller meal. I typically get about 3 to 4 servings out of a quart-sized jar. However, this meal is going to serve more because it has the 2 jars, so it's going to be a pretty more substantial size. And the other thing you can do, some people will do these in Mylar bags instead of mason jars for one reason or another. Sometimes that's easier for them to store. A lot of times people will make these for traveling. So a Mylar bag works a lot better for that, or if they are taking it along in their RV or camping or something like that. So that's another option. So besides the jars, you're also going to want your sealing type of lid for the jar. If you're keeping it on your shelf for the long term, you're going to want some oxygen absorbers. Now, I have had these meals on my shelf. I've had some of them on my shelf for over a year without using an oxygen absorber, and they were just fine. But I figure if you're going to store it for more than a few months, it's safest to use an oxygen absorber. Some people do use a vacuum sealer, so you can do that as well. I prefer oxygen absorbers more for long-term storage because they're a little bit better than vacuum sealing, but a lot of people do the vacuum sealing and it works just fine for them. I'm going to be using a canning funnel, which is going to be just helpful to get the things into the jar. And then I'm just going to be using some basic measuring cups and spoons. And that's really all we need for these meals in a jar. Very simple. So let's get started on the shepherd's pie. I'm going to start with the filling first. My first ingredient in the filling is going to be this espagnole, which is like a beef gravy powder. This is really tasty. Now, I do have a copycat recipe for this if you do not have this and you don't want to get this, or if you're watching this at a time when it happens to be sold out. But if you're watching this right after this video comes out, this is on sale for Black Friday. So I'll put a link down below to everything that I use in my meal today if people need sources. One thing about this gravy mix in particular is that this is gluten-free. So I actually looked over all of the ingredients I'm using in this shepherd's pie, and it's basically all gluten-free. So this would be a gluten-free dish. As long as you're using a gluten-free bouillon. I don't think my bouillon that I'm using is gluten-free. If you use Thrive Life's chicken bouillon, theirs is gluten-free. I do have that bouillon and I prefer to use it because it also doesn't have MSG. But I'm trying to be a good girl and use up what I already have open. I'm going to be using 1/3 cup of the espagnole. And this is a really nice sauce mix. It has the little bit of tomato hint in it that a lot of people like to put in their shepherd pie. It's got, it's a really, really good sauce mix. Next, I'm going to be adding my Hamburg. Now, this is freeze-dried Hamburg. I do need to clarify because I get questions about this all the time. Yes, Hamburg is ground beef. That's just what I kind of have always grown up calling it. So, you know, that's what my grandmother calls it. I don't really know where it came from, if it's a Maine thing or if it's just my family thing. Is there anybody else out there who says Hamburg? But just so everybody knows and doesn't get confused, this is freeze-dried ground beef. And I will have a link to where I get this also down below. Now I'm actually going to be using 1.5 cups today in this jar. And that's kind of a departure from what I typically do because I typically don't include more than 1 cup of meat in any one jar meal. Because just like when you cook with fresh food, the meat is going to be one of the costliest parts of the meal. And so I try to keep the cost down by cutting down the meat. But with this dish where this is shepherd's pie and it's really basic and a big, huge part of the dish is meat. And also where we are going to have 2 jars, so it's going to make a larger dish altogether. I just thought it needed a little bit more meat. Luckily, this is also on sale at the time I'm making this video, so I can stock up. So there's 1.5 cups of the ground beef. My next ingredient is going to be corn. This is freeze-dried corn also. Now, freeze-dried products are going to give you kind of a better quality and a much longer shelf life than dehydrated items if we use them wherever we can. And it's also going to have a briefer cook time, so it's going to use less fuel, which could be important in emergency situations. So I am keeping this shepherd's pie really simple. Now, when I grew up, the shepherd's pie I grew up with was literally just the Hamburg and then the corn and then the potato. And that was pretty much it. A little onion probably in with the Hamburg, a little bit of seasoning or gravy. Very simple. I am keeping this simple today and I'm just using corn, partly because sometimes it's nice to have a recipe that doesn't use a whole laundry list of ingredients, especially if you're just getting started and you don't really know what ingredients to buy. And the other thing is I realized I could keep this to mostly items that are on sale right now, which means that I and anyone else who wants to make a bunch of these meals and make this up in bulk is going to be able to get a really good deal, getting all that they need to make a bunch of jars. I usually will buy enough to make a bunch of jars to put on the shelf and still have some cans of single ingredients to keep in my food storage. I'm going to be using also 1.5 cups of the corn. Now, of course, you can switch this up for any vegetables that you like. You could replace part or all of the corn with anything, peas, carrots, green beans, whatever it is that you like in your shepherd's pie, or whatever you happen to have on hand, or you can keep it simple and just use the corn. To me, this is classic shepherd's pie, what I grew up with and what I really enjoy. I'm going to shake this down, make sure we have room for everything. Next, I'm going to use some freeze-dried chopped onion, and I am using 1/2 cup of the onion. And then all that remains to go in this jar is some seasoning. So I'm going to be using Chef's Choice for my seasoning. Now this is kind of an all-purpose seasoning, and I get people asking a lot what they can use as a substitute for the Chef's Choice if they don't have it or if it's sold out when they go to get it. So really, I guess any all-purpose, this is really, it's a salty, peppery, garlicky kind of seasoning. I really feel like it has a little hint of like a Worcestershire sauce flavor in it, which a lot of people will put Worcestershire sauce in their shepherd pie filling, and I thought about using some Worcestershire sauce powder. But then I decided that if I use this, I could just use this and not have to worry about the Worcestershire at all. Plus, we really like this, especially with beef. But another seasoning that we really like that I think would be a good substitute for this would be this, The Blend by this Kinder's brand. We like their seasonings a lot, and we've been using a ton of this one. It says salt, pepper, and garlic, which seems super simple, but it tastes really good. We use this on beef a lot also and on vegetables. It's really good on like grilled vegetables. It doesn't really have that extra Worcestershire kind of component that I think this one has, but this I think would be a really good substitute for this. And I am going to use 2 teaspoons of the Chef's Choice. We've got 1 teaspoon and 2 teaspoons. And that's it, easy peasy. This is a simple, simple recipe. So the next thing to do would be to put in my oxygen absorber. A 200 cc oxygen absorber is what I would typically use with a quart-sized jar meal. But I'm going to be fixing this up for you today to show you how it comes out and how it cooks up. And so I'm not going to bother with the oxygen absorber. I'm just going to throw a lid on this. And then we're going to get to work on the topping. So this has, of course, a mashed potato topping. So this is also going to be pretty simple. I'm starting with my mashed potatoes. Now these are Thrive Life's mashed potatoes, but I think that it would work just the same with any mashed potato flake from the grocery store, as long as it's the kind that's just potato. Like this is just potato. So this is the one where the instructions would tell you to add milk, butter, and salt when you prepare it, as opposed to the packets that already have all that seasoning added and stuff, and you just add boiling water. So I'm going to be using 2 cups of potato today. I'm going to start by putting in 1 cup, and then I'm going to kind of add all my other ingredients, my seasoning type of ingredients, so that they're kind of sandwiched in between 2 layers of potato. There's no real particular reason I'm doing it that way. I just am. But also I am going to have a little baggie on the top here, and I'm also going to have my oxygen absorber, theoretically, if I was putting this away. So I don't like to put certain ingredients on the very top that might stick to the baggie or the oxygen absorber, and kind of, I might lose some of those. If it's like a seasoning that there's already not very much of in the jar, I'm weird that way. So in the middle here, I'm going to add some sour cream powder. And I am making this and have tested with Thrive Life sour cream powder, because if you watch the channel a lot, sour cream powder is one of those ingredients, one of fairly few ingredients where I have definitely noticed a difference sometimes between different brands as far as flavor. I have tried other brands and had some that were just a lot tangier or a lot different in flavor. And so I don't want somebody to use a different brand and get a different result and not know why. So that's part of the reason why I put the brands and links to exactly what I use down in my description for people to find. Often the brand doesn't matter, so I do try to make a note when I know for sure that it does matter. But you never know. If you haven't tried different brands, you never know if there's going to be a difference. Next, I'm going to use some instant milk powder. And I'm also using a 1/4 cup of the instant milk. I'm going to use some butter powder. I'm using 2 tablespoons of butter powder, which is the same as 1/8 of a cup. So I do have this little 1/8 of a cup measure, which I really, really treasure, because I only have to scoop once instead of measuring 2 tablespoons, and not every set comes with 1/8 of a cup. So I'd actually like to get more of those, because I have 2 of them, and I feel like they're always in the dishwasher or something like that when I need them. I like to have multiple sets of measuring utensils, because I don't like to dip the same one into multiple different ingredients without at least cleaning it off in between. So it just saves me time and hassle if I have multiple sets. Next, I'm going to be adding some parsley, just dried parsley, mostly for color, and just making it look a little better. So if you needed to skip this, you could, but I think most of us have dried parsley on hand. And I'm also using 2 tablespoons of this. So once again, that's 1/8 of a cup, or 2 tablespoons. And next I'm going to use some chicken bouillon. Now this was what I was talking about. If you want this dish to be gluten-free, I'm assuming parsley is gluten-free. I didn't check on that one, but it's just parsley. So this bouillon, I don't know. Says it may contain wheat ingredients. It has a bunch of allergens listed. It does not seem to say gluten-free, so I'm assuming this one isn't, but that's something you could easily change if you wanted to make this a completely gluten-free recipe. I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of the chicken bouillon. And because the chicken bouillon is salty, obviously, I don't add any salt to this. I don't add any pepper either, but if you like pepper, you could add pepper. But I don't feel like it needs salt with the bouillon, but of course, that's something that everyone can change for themselves. If they want a little more or less salt and seasoning, but especially salt, then that is entirely up to the person who's making the dish. That's why one important thing that I want to point out here, I and a lot of other people love to make these meals in bulk. Like you can lay out your jars and make half a dozen or a dozen meals really quickly if you just do it assembly line style. It's almost just as quick and easy to make, 6 or 10 or 12 as it is to make one. However, I really don't recommend any recipe making them in bulk before you've tried it at least once. So I would recommend making 1 jar and trying it, cooking it up, fixing it up, letting your family try it, and just make sure it's something you like, because everyone has different tastes. Like we don't all like the same things. So try it and make sure you like it. And if there's anything you want to adjust, like you feel like you want more or less salt or seasoning or anything like that, or if you need to adjust the water amounts when you're preparing it. I know that I've had people who live in different elevations or areas where it's drier tell me that they had to adjust the water or the cooking instructions a little bit. You just never know. So make any adjustments you need to make. Always keep notes of them on your recipe so you remember. because trust me, you're not just going to remember necessarily. I know that from experience. But after that, once you're sure you're happy with the recipe, that's a good time to make them up in bulk. So those are all of the additional sort of seasoning ingredients. So next I'm going to be just adding that extra cup of mashed potato. And you can see that we have some space left here in the jar. So what I am going to do, because I personally really like cheese on the top of my shepherd's pie. Some people do cheese and some people don't. I think it's a pretty common thing to do cheese. I'm going to be using pepper jack cheese today, which is not typical. And I'll tell you why I'm using this, because I was going to do cheddar cheese, which seems like the classic cheese to use on a shepherd's pie, unless you do American cheese. But I did not have, I would have had to go get a new can of cheddar cheese to open, because I don't have one open right now, and I didn't really want to go get it. So I realized I had pepper jack that was just already open. So I figured I'd try it with this, and it is not bad. And then the other thing I realized was that the pepper jack cheese is actually on sale this during Black Friday also, which made it so that like basically just about everything in this meal almost is on sale right now. So I thought that was kind of cool. But that being said, if you would rather use cheddar cheese, or that's what you have on hand, definitely use cheddar cheese. This is a little bit different. So use whatever kind of cheese you want, or just leave the cheese off entirely if you're not a cheese person on your shepherd's pie, or you don't happen to have freeze-dried cheese. I'm going to put a cup of cheese in here. So this is about 3 cups right now, which means if you don't add the cheese, you should be able to fit this mixture into a 1.5 pint jar. So we're going to want the cheese in a little separate baggie. I use the ones that don't zip seal, because my reasoning is I'm going to put the oxygen absorber in here, and I'm going to want it to react with all the oxygen in the jar, including what's inside the baggie with my cheese. So I just kind of twist the top a little bit so that I feel like the oxygen absorber can still work with what's inside the baggie. And it seems to have worked for me. Now, like I said, I'm going to be putting about a cup of cheese in here, and that does give a pretty thick layer of cheese on the top of the shepherd pie. So if you want to cut it down a little bit, by all means do, because this was a lot of cheese for the size of shepherd's pie that I made, but we did like it. So there is our completed potato topping for the shepherd's pie. I'm just going to put a lid on this one and get these 2 labeled up so they can be a complete meal ready to go. So now let's fix up our shepherd's pie and see how quick and easy this comes together and what it looks like when it's done. I'm using my butane stove, my little butane burner. I highly recommend, if you don't have a way to cook when your power's out, that you grab something like this. This, I think, is like the cheapest and simplest way to go. You can get one of these for $20 to $30, and they work great. They also store away really easily. Mine has a little case that it comes in that'll sit right on a shelf. The fuel is also pretty easy to store, can store for a long time safely. And these are typically considered safe to use indoors, but definitely do your own research and make sure that that's something that you feel comfortable with. I'm going to start by whipping up the filling, and I've got just a medium size, probably about a 12-inch, little heavy-bottomed skillet here. I'm going to go ahead and add the contents of my filling jar to the skillet. And then we're going to just add water to this. These are just add water meals. Now, it's important to remember, especially if you might be in some sort of emergency situation, not have a lot of things or not want to wash a lot of dishes, that you do have measurements to measure the water right on the side of your jars, roughly. Even if I'm not using this to measure, I do like to dump the water into the jar and rinse out anything that might be residual in the jar. All right, I am using 3 cups of water. I'm just going to rinse this out and dump it in here. And I am going to give this a little mix and get everything moistened. Just try to get the gravy mix blended in. Oh, I smell the corn. That smells so good. I'm going to let this set for a few minutes before I put on the heat, and then I'm going to put it on a low heat and bring it up to temperature slowly, because this does not take very long, but the Hamburg is what's going to take the longest. It is already cooked, so it's perfectly safe. It doesn't have to be cooked. It just has to be refreshed, meaning it has to get the moisture back into it, the liquid back into it that was removed in the freeze drying process. And meats take the longest. So just to make sure that we're not going to have any slightly crunchy bits of Hamburg, I'm going to let this sit in the water for just a few minutes and then bring it up to heat slowly. It's funny because I love to eat the Hamburg crunchy right out of the canister, and I love to eat it when it's all completely refreshed, but I don't seem to like to eat it halfway in between. If it's supposed to be refreshed, I want it to be all the way refreshed. So now keep in mind, there can be variations depending on, I don't know, the humidity where you live and different things. Even different measuring utensils sometimes aren't perfectly accurate. And I live in a super old house and nothing is straight in this house. The floors are crooked, the counters are crooked. I feel like I cannot get a straight, even measurement to save my life in a measuring cup. So if you get results that are either too liquidy or you have things that don't fully get tender, don't seem to have enough liquid, then by all means you can change up the liquid amounts a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to get a lid on this. I'm just going to let it set for about 5 minutes. Then I'm going to put it on a slow heat and get it up to temperature. All right, so it's been 5 minutes that it's been sitting, and I'm going to go ahead and put the heat on nice and low, and I mean medium, not like super low. I do want it to come up to a simmer, but I just want to let it get there slowly. And I am going to keep the lid on for now. That's going to help the moisture stay in there for now to be able to hydrate all of the meat and vegetables. And if I need it to thicken up at the end at all, I can take off the lid. All right, you can see this is finally starting to simmer just a little bit. So I'm going to keep this at a low simmer. I might adjust it down if I need to. We'll see the heat. And I'm going to keep this at a low simmer for just about 10 minutes. All right, so it has been 10 minutes. This is thickening up really nicely. I am going to check and see if the Hamburg has gotten tender yet, because that's the one thing we need to happen. I think it pretty much has. I'm going to let this go for just another couple of minutes with the lid off, just to thicken it up a little bit more, and then it will continue to thicken and absorb the liquid as it sits while we get the potato topping ready. Okay, so that was just 2 more minutes with the lid off, and this is nice and thick. I'm going to go ahead and set this aside, turn off the burner, and set it aside while I get the potato topping ready. I am going to throw the lid back on it just to keep the heat in, because the hotter everything is when we get ready to put it in the oven, the less time we'll have to bake it. Now, I do want to point out that shepherd's pie is something that's typically baked. So I have several different ways that I can bake when the power's out. I have indoor ways and outdoor ways. We have a sun oven. We have a propane camp oven. I have a little oven that I can use indoors that uses the canned heat. And I will put links to all of those different ways to cook without power down in the description box below the video. So if you don't have a way to do that and you're interested in checking some of those out, you can. But if you don't have any way to bake something like this, then you could just have the filling hot and then whip up the potato topping, dollop it over the top of it, just put the lid on and keep it on the heat for just a couple of minutes and just serve it just like that. You wouldn't even have to bake this dish. And that's something else I just thought of and realized, if I would have done this in my cast iron skillet, I probably could have just put the potato topping right on top of the mixture in the skillet and put it right in the oven. I wouldn't have done that probably with one of my grid down cooking methods, because I don't know if the pan with the handle would fit in any of my alternative ovens, but that's something I could do if I was just doing that at home. When the power was not out, I could do it right in a cast iron skillet and just have the one pot. All right, so for the potato topping, I've just got a Pyrex bowl here. And so I am going to open up my topping and very carefully just remove this baggie of cheese. Now, this is actually something that I actually could have and should have been doing while I was cooking the meat mixtures. I could have started refreshing the cheese. So I'm going to do that real quick right now. Now, if you were in a situation when you didn't want to dirty a lot of extra dishes, you could do it right in this baggie. You could put the water in the baggie and just kind of seal it up and just shake it around like that and let it set like that until it was refreshed. Oh, see, this is what I mean by what I put on the top. It's going to stick to your baggie or your oxygen absorber, whatever you put in there. So that's why I'm careful about what I put on the very top. But since I'm not real concerned about having extra dishes today because I'm not in a power outage or an emergency, I am just going to use an extra little container. So this is just like a little Rubbermaid container that will fit this cheese with a little bit of extra room to tumble. Now this is about a cup of cheese, so I want about 3.5 tablespoons of cold water. You always want to refresh the cheese with cold water, freeze-dried cheese. So I'm just going to put this water on here, and I'm just going to add the lid, and I'm just going to kind of give it a little shake to tumble it around so that that liquid can come into contact with most of the cheese. And then I'm just going to let it set for, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes. Now this, I can put it in the fridge because I do have electricity, but it would be fine setting out if this was a power outage or an emergency or something like that and I didn't want to open my fridge. This would be fine to sit out just like this, even in the little baggie. So the next step is just to empty all of this potato stuff, all these potato fixins into the bowl. And I'm just going to use a whisk to kind of combine everything around and mix everything around. This will just help make sure that we don't have any spots where something clumps together like bouillon or anything, and we don't have any spots that are super salty or spots that are super flavorless if we had a spot that didn't get some seasoning. I'm not worried about any little clumps of like the sour cream or anything because that will be fine. It will break right up as this gets mixed with the hot water. So I'm just going to bring some water up to boiling, and I need about 3 cups of boiling water. Now that is something that can be a little bit of personal preference. Some people like their potato stiffer, some people like their potato a little bit softer, and it can also depend on things like the humidity in the room or around where you're working. So just keep that in mind. Use 3 cups as a guideline. If you like your potatoes stiffer, you can pour it slowly and just so you could stop if you want it a little early, or you can always add a little bit more boiling water if you want them softer. I think that parsley makes it look so pretty, but you could leave that out. And I have also sometimes done freeze-dried chives in or on top of the potato topping like this. That's another good addition. All right, so I have got 3 cups of boiling water here, and I am just gonna go ahead and mix this into the potatoes. Like I said, you can kind of adjust this based on your personal preference. I'm gonna start by whipping it with a fork. I think it's going to need all of this 3 cups and possibly a little more, but so I'm just going to go ahead and add all the rest of that. Whip them to make them smooth and make sure I get everything up off the bottom. And now just let this set for about 5 minutes just to make sure it's all fully absorbed. I don't feel like my other potatoes had this much green. All right, so now I'm going to bring this all together. So I've got a 2-quart, it says 9-inch diameter glass baking dish here, a round one. This is how we usually had shepherd's pie, in a round dish. Now you can see this filling is still pretty warm. You can see how nice it has thickened up, and it's still steaming warm, and so are the potatoes. So this really isn't going to have to bake very long. Now if you had some nonstick spray, you could spray this, but it really doesn't need it. It'll be fine without it. So especially if you're in an emergency, you would not need that. All right, so let's just spread this out. Now I'm just going to go ahead and get these potatoes on the top. I'm going to kind of try to spread them evenly so that we can get them spread without making too much of a mess. Keeping the layers separate is the challenge. This is quite a bit of parsley in this potato, so it actually makes it look a little green, but you could cut down on that if that bothers you. But also the layer of cheese over the top is going to cover that up. But the parsley is definitely an optional addition. You could cut that down or leave it out altogether, or you could even put the parsley just in a teeny little baggie or envelope or something inside the jar and just sprinkle it over the top, maybe at the end of the baking, just for looks. Lots of different ways you could do it. So I'm just going to get this spread out as evenly as I can. This is very therapeutic. So this is now ready to go in the oven. I'm going to put it in the oven at 375. This would be very forgiving. Like I said, everything's already warm. We're really just heating it up a little bit more, getting it bubbly, maybe browning the top a little bit. You could put it in anywhere from 325 to 375, more or less. If you're working with alternative like ovens, then sometimes you have a hard time maintaining a temperature or getting a really high temperature. Everything in this pan is already cooked. So even if you're just kind of heating it up low and slow in a solar oven or something, it's going to be fine. All right, so you can see it is all bubbly now. So I'm going to go ahead and get the cheese on it. So I've got my cheese here that's been sitting while that was in the oven. So 15 or 20 minutes, I guess, from when we mixed it up. And this has totally come back to fresh cheese, just like fresh cheese. It's going to melt just like fresh cheese. It is all ready to go. Now, this is quite a bit of cheese, like I said, for this size of shepherd's pie, but we are a cheese-loving family, so we are okay with that. You could cut this amount down, or you could have no cheese at all. Spread that out evenly. And I'm going to go ahead and pop this back in the oven just long enough to melt the cheese, so probably about 5 minutes. Okay, it is done and ready to serve. I am going to let it cool off just a little bit because that is really hot. It looks and smells delish. All right, now let's try the shepherd's pie. That's good. That is super yummy. If you like shepherd's pie, you're gonna like this. That shepherd's pie was delicious, but I also came up with another meal that shares the classic comfort of shepherd's pie, but with a twist that makes it even faster and easier to get on the table. Before I tell you about that, I do want to mention two very important things. First, the company that I buy most of my meal in a jar ingredients from, Thrive Life, has their big Black Friday sale going on right now through November 30th, 2024. So it's the perfect time to stock up on ingredients for all your meals in a jar and long-term food for your prepper pantry right now. I'll have a link below directly to the lowest prices. If you're watching this later and that sale is over, my links will always take you to the lowest prices available at the time. And you can also text alert to my number that I'll put right down below and get yourself on my text alert system to let you know right away when there's a new sale or coupon code. I also wanted to let you know about the giveaway drawing we're doing right now. The winner is going to end up with $100 worth of free credit for ingredients to make meals in a jar, or whatever else they want to do with it. Years ago, when I first became interested in making meals in a jar like these, I decided to sign up as an independent consultant for Thrive Life. Thrive Life is now the biggest freeze-dried food company in the world, but they've still maintained the same level of caring about the products they produce that they had back when they were a much smaller company. They're known for having very clean food, high quality standards, and also having the greatest variety of products that they offer. I knew becoming a consultant was the best way to save the most money buying the food for my family. I never imagined what it could actually turn into, and now I've been able to help thousands of people from all over with their emergency food storage and building a clean pantry. I love giving back to my customers whenever I can, so right now I'm doing a giveaway of $100 in free credit on my Thrive Life site. And the giveaway is open to any of my customers, whether they've ever purchased or not. There's no purchase necessary. If you are my customer, you should have already received an email from me with a link to enter. So if you didn't get that, check in your junk mail. And then if you don't find it there, reach out so we can figure out why that is. And if you aren't a customer already, all you have to do is create a free account to be eligible to enter. Of course, an account also comes with other benefits as well. You get access to the Refer a Friend program with your very own link to share to possibly earn more free credit. And you get an email alert from me whenever there's a sale or a coupon code for you to use. The contest is running through Tuesday, November 26th of 2024. So if you're watching before then, look down below for a link where you can submit your email and I'll send you a link to get registered. It's that simple to get entered into the drawing. If you're watching this later and the contest is over, never fear because we'll be doing things like this again in the future. Just make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and use my link below to register for an account right now so that you'll be notified the next time we do a drawing. Whether you're shopping or just registering, make sure that you use my link and see my name and face at the top of the website just to make sure that you don't end up in the wrong place. On to our next meal. This one is a shepherd's pie soup. This is so creamy, hearty, and comforting, and it's done all in one pot right on the stovetop. You won't believe how easy this is, so let's get started. So for the shepherd's pie soup, I am going to be using a wide mouth quart mason jar again, but this time we're only going to need one jar. And the first ingredient that I'm going to use is going to be the Hamburg again. And this time I'm doing a cup of the Hamburg, 1 cup. And incidentally, this is one of my favorite items to snack on dry. If you are a person who needs to eat low carb, then I really enjoy snacking on that Hamburg dry. That and the sausage crumbles, freeze-dried sausage crumbles, are a really nice little snack for people who have to be low carb. And next I'm adding corn, but this time I'm going to be a little bit more creative with the vegetables. It's not going to be just corn. It's going to be different vegetables. But once again, this is one where you could do any combination of vegetables that you like, that you think would go good in this, that you like with your shepherd's pie. I'm going to be using a 1/2 cup of corn. And then I'm adding peas, freeze-dried peas. And I'm doing 1/3 cup of the peas. Now I'm going to go ahead and add my mashed potato flakes, same ones I used before. And I'm doing 3/4 cup. So there's a 1/2 cup. And then another 1/4 cup. Next, I'm going to be adding some carrots. Now, these are actually dehydrated carrots. Freeze drying with carrots is iffy, so a lot of the commercial companies don't do it. So these are a lot easier to get. Now, of course, dehydrated items have a shorter shelf life, but with these carrots, because they are so dry, they're not that bad. These have I think it's an 8-year shelf life, I believe. So you're still going to get probably at least 5 to 7 years out of a meal like this with the dehydrated item. So that's a 1/4 cup of the carrots. Next, I'm doing chopped onion again, also a 1/4 cup. Next, I'm going to be adding chicken bouillon, and I'm doing a tablespoon of the chicken bouillon. And this, once again, is, now sometimes people will say that a tablespoon is too much when they see a tablespoon in a soup recipe. But keep in mind, the tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. And 1 teaspoon of bouillon makes basically 1 cup of broth, 8 ounces. So a soup like this is going to be using way more than 3 cups of water. So it's really not as excessive as it seems. And I actually am not adding any extra salt to this recipe. And for me, a person who likes salt pretty much, it was plenty salty. I loved the flavor. But if you feel like you need more salt in it, then you can certainly add more salt. Or you could add something like one of these seasonings too. And next, I'm going to be adding garlic powder. 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. Now, I'm assuming that garlic powder is gluten-free. It doesn't seem to say on the package. But once again, with this recipe, other than the chicken bouillon, everything I'm using is gluten-free. So just choose a gluten-free bouillon, which if you do have to eat gluten-free, I'm sure that you have one that you like. And then this should be a gluten-free dish. Next, I'm going to be adding some instant milk, a 1/4 cup of the instant milk. I'm adding sour cream powder again, a 1/4 cup of the sour cream powder. And then I'm adding velouté. So this is another sauce like the Espagnole, but this is a chicken gravy mix. And I'll tell you what, I tried to do copycats of all of these sauces, and this was the one that I could not nail, and I couldn't make anything near as good as that. It's a really good sauce. If you were going to buy one, I would choose that one every time, because my copycat for the Espagnole was better, I thought. And I have a bechamel white sauce copycat that I like very well. This sauce I really recommend. This one is on sale right now on Black Friday also. And it is another gluten-free sauce also. So like I mentioned, that makes this meal entirely gluten-free if you use a gluten-free bouillon. Once again, if you were going to be putting this away for long-term storage, you'd want to throw in an oxygen absorber. I'm going to fix this one up tonight, so I'm just going to add my lid. And there is our shepherd's pie soup, all ready to go. Now I'm going to show you how to fix up the shepherd's pie soup. So I've got my emergency burner again, and just a basic soup pot. And I'm just going to start by emptying my jar right into the pot. And then to this mix, I'm going to add 6 cups of cold water. Once again, I am going to dump the water first into the jar to rinse out the last little bits of powders and things that might be in there. And there's our last 2 cups of water, so a total of 6 cups. Now I'm just going to give this a good mix, get this all blended together. There might be a few clumps, once again, of maybe some of the dairy products, like probably the sour cream, and that is fine. Those are going to melt right in as this heats. And once this is all blended, I'm going to put this on a medium heat again. I want to get this up to a simmer, but I want to let it get there a little bit slowly, just so we have enough time for our beef to get tender and fully refreshed. All right, so now I'm just going to put on the heat, and I am going to put a lid on this to keep the heat and the moisture inside. All right, so now you can probably see this is starting to bubble and it's already getting thickened, but we do want to give it enough time for, like I mentioned, the hamburger to get soft all the way through, and actually the little carrot bits, because they're dehydrated, they need a little bit of time, but because they're so small, it's not going to take long at all. I'm going to turn this down and just keep it at a simmer with the cover on for about 10 minutes. You can stir this occasionally just to make sure that nothing sticks on the bottom. All right, so it's been 10 minutes and this is nicely thickened, and let's see if it's all done. Yeah, that's perfect. I am going to, however, put the lid back on and just let it set without the heat on for about 10 minutes. I do that with most of my soups like this. It just kind of helps everything come together a little bit better. And it also lets it cool off so you don't burn your mouth. So I'll see you back here in 10 minutes when it's ready to serve. All right, 10 minutes is up. Let's give it a stir. You can see that things just kind of float a little bit less and kind of become assimilated into the whole dish if you give it that extra 10 minutes of standing time. People sometimes doubt me and say there's no way that that dish would change that much with that 10-minute time, but it really does. Because of the way that freeze-dried food is, they remove all of the water, but it doesn't break down the cell structure. It keeps the cell walls just like that. It doesn't shrivel up like dehydrated food. So those become air spaces. So it's very, very buoyant. And so even though it was all done at the end of the cooking time, it still floats a little bit, and it just kind of all comes together a lot better if you give it that extra 10 minutes at the end, I find. All right, this is ready to serve. Let's serve us up a bowl. This is so beautiful, thick and creamy. This is almost like some sort of a chowder or a creamy potato soup. I love my soups thick and hearty. That's how I really like them. This is going to be amazing. All right, let's give this a try. This is so good. So comforting. Like I said, I didn't add a whole bunch of extra salt. It's not super salty, and I usually like my food salty, but I think this is the perfect amount of flavor for me. Like I mentioned, though, if you're somebody who likes things really salty, that's really easy to add more salt, pepper, whatever people like. They can season it up themselves. I think this is the perfect soup for kids. I think like a lot of kids would like this because it's a lot of the foods that they like: potatoes or mashed potatoes, their favorite little veggies like peas and carrots, hamburg. I mean, who wouldn't love this? I think I actually like this better than the actual shepherd's pie itself. All right, friends, I hope you enjoy these 2 new recipes for shelf-stable emergency meals in a jar. I will have printable recipe pages linked down below this video, as well as links to the ingredients and supplies that I used. If you're watching from somewhere that you can't access the links, go to wickedprepared.com to access the printables. If you're new to the concept of meals in a jar, I have a whole playlist of different meal in a jar recipes that you can check out if you'd like. Don't forget to check out the drawing info down below. And I have some exciting news to share. Thrive Life recently dropped the cost to join as a consultant drastically. And they also now give all consultants free credit back on their own purchases, which is an amazing way to get some free food every month and really build up your supply of good shelf-stable food. And I also just learned something else that I didn't know before. If someone has already ordered and then they join as a consultant later in the same month, they'll also get free credit back retroactively on all the orders that they placed earlier that same calendar month. They also have a couple of steeply discounted packages that are only available at the time that consultants sign up. Something to keep in mind if you're already a customer and have already placed an order this month. When you become a consultant, you become a part of something really amazing. At the very least, you get the lowest prices on the food and earn a rebate of free credit on every purchase you make. And who knows, maybe you'll even decide to build a business with it and earn some extra income helping other people to become better prepared and eat a cleaner, healthier diet. Either way, it's incredibly rewarding. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a potato emoji down in the comments and check out this playlist next for some more great meal in a jar recipes. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.